Thank you for sharing your integral model. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll just limit to one right now. Listening to some of your things online and hearing you today, there's lots of talk about reality and what reality is. And at least now we have this term of virtual reality.
Yeah.
Do you see that as a door for people understanding that there are multiple realities? And how does that fit into an integral model? And how can integral use this new tool?
If you're talking about virtual realities and how it shows, there are a lot of different things that you can get from that, for sure. A lot of people think of the Matrix, for example, because what they did was show that you can actually, through super advanced technology, in a sense, broadcast a reality inside a brain in such a way that it can't tell the difference. Now, that raises the extremely interesting philosophical question. Well, actually, several of them. The Matrix has had more college academic papers written on it than any other art piece in history. 1 billion people saw that movie. Larry Wachowski and I are actually pretty good friends, and Larry is on the board of directors of Integral Institute. I mean, the actual voting board, so he's an intimate part of what we're doing. And there's a movie that's being created right now that Larry and I are working on that we call the Everything Movie. And as weird as it sounds, it's a Matrix treatment of the book, A Brief History of Everything. And it uses the Octal Code as basically explaining what the Matrix was. So exactly these kinds of issues are things that we're, at least that slice of your question, are things that we're dealing with all the time. And what would it actually take if you had somebody in a Matrix? That was a first start, but it was kind of a flatland psychology. What happened if you had a dozen different levels of development and you're trying to keep people happy inside a matrix? You'd have to assign them at whatever their level of development was, or it's just not going to work for them. And so Larry and I toyed with the idea of actually creating, we were going to do this on the Integral Animatrix follow-up. They've done leading edge computers. A lot of you have seen a DVD called the called the Animatrix. And we're thinking about doing an integral version of it, which would be, you have people that are in the matrix that actually start moving up the spiral of development. And so you get people sort of towards the top that start questioning it in all sorts of different ways. Can you use that to help get the idea of multiple realities across? Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Keep in mind, what's the one thing, though, and this is what the completely misunderstood Rene Descartes was trying to get across. If you take somebody in the matrix and then take somebody out of the matrix, what's the one thing that didn't change? I amness. It's really fundamentally important to realize how the already enlightened mind is always with you, always. There is something in you right now that is conscious of everything, literally. You do have big mind. It is there 24 hours a day. And then, in addition to this non-dual, open, empty, transparent, naturally arising, spontaneous nature of what you are, there's just types of attention and types of identifications, and we identify with objects over here, and we identify with everything except big mind, or non-dual awareness, or the pure witness, or absolute subjectivity. And identified with these small, finite objects, we spend our life in various forms of suffering. And that's the first rule of Buddhism, but it's also the first rule, basically, of any of the traditions. In Christianity, you are born in sin. That never made sense. Did that make sense to you? You're like, but I didn't do anything wrong. I want to. Who can I talk to about this one? And
Well, no,
Do you have-
you just reminded me of something
Yeah.
that you've spoken about,
Yeah.
where with advanced forms of virtual reality or whatever, you can act out so many of your lower impulses that they'll become so boring that you might just start to question what is behind everything else. So that just...
in the book Boomeritis, one of the things I did was just that. There's very, very serious scientists working on longevity that will tell you very reasonably within 50 years or so, human lifespan could be at least 140. And there are people in Texas pointing out that there's no reason humans can't live to be 200,000 years old. Now, wouldn't it be embarrassing to be like 11 years old and fall off a cliff, and kill yourself? I mean, would you be nervous if you've got 200,000 years to live? I mean, you don't want to be careful in college, with drugs. Don't OD on that. That would look really bad. Any number of things could happen. Don't you think people get a little paranoid in that kind of culture about worrying about what's going to happen to them because you could cut short your 200,000 years? That would be such a bummer. And embarrassing. Can you imagine your tombstone, died 28, But I use that as a sort of a plot gimmick because I actually think there's a great deal of truth to this, that even if lifespan was 200, 300, 400 years, it's just that. 10,000 years. So 5,000 years into your life, you've slept with every single person on the planet. And so every time somebody says, when you slept with your partner, you slept with everybody they've slept with, doesn't matter, everybody slept with everybody. So you've got that going, you're doing psychoanalysis, and the first 3,000 years are on mom. And then, so now you've worked your way into the really interesting stuff. You decide, that you'll take, 100 years and walk the Great Wall of China, and it's astonishing the kind of stuff that would be going on there. I used it as a gimmick to say people would have no choice but to turn inward and explore the unbelievable nature and number of inner worlds that would be basically the only way people could go. And so there was this whole notion about what would happen under those circumstances. We are going to be facing things like that. Longevity is projected into at least 120 to 140, and that probably really within about 20 years it's going to start. And it's going to be just a profound reorientation. And the small percentage of people doing this kind of stuff will have a lot more time to do it. And people that are not doing this kind of stuff will have a whole lot of time to do what they're doing. It's just scary every way you look, isn't it? It's so good that we all have access to transcendental bliss and can have respite from the headlines. Anyway, so that's certainly one of the areas. And virtual reality, yes. Stay tuned for the next Wachowski thing. I think you guys really like it.